Hey there, and welcome to my channel. I am your host, Dancing Johari, and today, well, I have a rather unique custom to do. I got my first commission. Well, actually it's not my first, it's more like my third, but it's my second one for this channel. Anyway, let me show you what we're making. A few years ago, I made this doll, the Sorceress of Grayskull from the Masters of the Universe movie back in 1987. She's a traditional Barbie doll. She was one of my very first customs, and I really loved making her. She came out beautiful, and it took me a while to figure out how to do everything with her. That should make this custom a little bit easier, don't you think? Shall we show them, sorcerers, what we're making today? Well then, let's do it! Introducing my first custom action figure. This Sorceress of Grayskull from Revelations will make a great base, and as you can see, she is much smaller than a traditional Monster High or even a Barbie doll. She's actually about half the size. That makes everything about this a little more challenging. To the workstation! Okay, so just to let you know, this is from the 1987 Masters of the Universe movie. And there's a lot to this costume. I mean, you have a drape coming down from the headdress. You have these crystals. She has a long white wig, plus all the details on the dress. So let's get started. There's a lot to do. I took off the headdress off camera just because I had to figure out how to take it off. And then the head I discovered when I did that popped off very easily, as did the cape. Now the dress I did slit with an X-Acto knife ahead, and then I just popped it off. Easy, right? Anyway, so I put the head aside, and, well, I also had removed the hands. Let's just take off the factory paint. Alright, tried. I'm using 100% pure acetone, and I don't know what this company is using for the Masterverse series, but I have to say, it's good. It's really good. Alright, so let's just, instead of doing a full face-up, we're just going to paint over certain things, like her lips and her eyebrows. So first, I tried using what I thought would make it look blonde, and no, it looks like her skin tone. Alrighty. So I removed it while it was still wet. This is acrylic paint, and it does come off pretty easily while it's still wet. So then I tried to do the eyelashes, just giving them a little bit more of a fluffy detail, and oh no, now she looks like a goth chick. Let's take some of that off. She's not supposed to look quite like that. I added up just adding like a tiny little dot of paint at the end. And that was just enough. Now for her lips, I'm using a rose-colored acrylic paint that I use for my miniatures. And while I was lightening up her lips, I also gave her a bit of a smile. It was fairly easy. I just added just a slight curl up at the corners, and I also gave her lips just a little bit more volume in a couple areas. Taking a makeup sponge, I took my flat white acrylic paint that I use for my miniatures also, because it adheres really well to plastic, and I just started painting over the paint. I just went over all the blue areas. So her boots, her sleeves, and her neckline. All got 2 coats of flat white first. We want to make her match the character on the film, and the film version of the Sorceress is all white and silver. So let's give her that. After 2 coats of flat white and letting it dry, in between each coat, plus a little bit more drying time, I took my separate makeup brush, and, well, not brush, sponge, and I took some pearly white acrylic paint, and I just started applying that over the white, and oh my goodness, it just added just enough of the sparkle and made everything match up really nice. It's like I'm attacking her with a sponge. So after letting all of this dry, and when you put it on with a makeup sponge, it ends up being a fairly thin layer, so it dries pretty quick. I went back over it with a makeup sponge again, but this time with varnish, and I used Liquitex semi-gloss just to keep the sparkle, but I didn't want it to be too shiny, so thus the makeup sponge. And that was just enough. That'll help lock everything in. And I took some flat white for the eyebrows and painted the eyebrows. The blonde just wasn't working. Okay, now this is the same dress pattern I used for my Barbie doll version, and my husband worked his magic. Being a graphic artist, he scanned this into his computer and he reduced it in size for me and printed it out in different sizes. So I just got to take this different pattern sizes, held the doll up against it, or the figure rather, and see which one worked. And it was a 64% one that definitely works. 50% was too small, but the 64%, that was just right. So if you have a pattern that you already use for a bigger doll and you want to use it for something smaller, like a custom action figure, just try reducing it in size on your computer. Works wonders. So I go ahead and cut out the pattern pieces and put them together, but this makes a pointy train. I want a more rounded train, so I took this and put it together with the rest of the back, like I normally would. So that basically means I took that little strip and taped it to the pattern for the dress back. And then I traced it out onto computer paper and changed the shape while I was at it. See, this is where it lines up with that one. I also cut out, while I was cutting things out, I went ahead and cut out the rest of the pattern also. And I had an X-Acto knife in case I had any tight corners or that I just couldn't use my scissors for. And on this one, I'm using my tiniest thread scissors. This works so well for tiny things. Now, if you cannot get your scissors into those little tight curves on this, I highly suggest using your X-Acto knife. I'll put a link to where I bought the pattern. I bought it off of eBay. I'll see if it's still on there, and I'll put a link in the description box below. Now, here's the one that I altered, and I just traced on the same markings for where the darts need to go, and then I just held a random bit of paper up to it to design the cape. And we're going to cut that one on a fold, and we'll see how that turns out later. I think I made it big enough, but I may have made it too big. We'll find out. Once I have everything, all the fabric cut out, I go ahead and put the two, for the dress front, I took the two right sides, faced them together, because this is a seam. It's two pieces, so you have to sew down the middle. So I pinned them together. And because this is so small, I mean, on the original dress, I did use my sewing machine, but it was so small, I just hand stitched everything. I just wanted that little extra bit of control that I can use with hand stitching that I don't quite get with machine stitching because the seams are just so tiny on this scale. Now we have a nice pretty seam in the middle of our dress that I need to cover up. So let's use some ribbon. Not this one. This one's not wide enough, but this will be great for the crisscrossing parts. Ah, there we go. I used a wider ribbon and hand stitched it down on both sides. Then I took the pattern, held it up, and I flipped it over and found where I need to put a dart and hand sewed a couple of darts. For these, it's like 3, 4, 5 stitches max and you're done. It's so tiny. So this is after both of the front darts are done, but now they have to do another dart for the bust, because there's 2 that goes in just under the arms, and then there's 2 that goes lengthwise. Once I do all that, I go ahead and take some ribbon, fold it over, cut it in half. I do this twice, and then I stitch it one piece at a time down in a crisscrossing pattern. I just use like a stitch in the middle and a stitch on each end because this is so small. I don't want to see a bunch of stitches. And I could have used glue. If you're going to use glue, use something like Uhu or something. But I just don't want the stiffness of glue. You know what I mean? I want this to stay nice and soft because we want it to mold to the body. after that night, I went ahead and stitched together the back up to where I needed to put it, because you don't want to stitch all the back middle seam together, because that's where you have to have your opening to put it on. So I went ahead and I pinned together the shoulders and stitched them together once that was all done. Once the shoulders are sewn, I go ahead and add the sleeves and pin them on one at a time and hand sew them. We don't hand sew the sleeves closed at this point. We're just doing where it joins with the shoulder seam right now. And again, so tiny, and for some reason my camera just did not want to focus. I'm not sure if I was trying to zoom in too close, if I had it set too close, and I don't know. It just didn't want to focus. I'm sorry. Okay, once both sleeves are secure, you fold it wrong side out on the dress and go ahead and pin and sew up the side seams and the underseam of the sleeve. Once both of those are done, go ahead and turn it right side out. At this point, I'd go ahead and try it on the doll, and it's perfect. It's so cool. Now I'm going to take a little bit of Velcro that's meant for fabrics, and I'm going to stick it to the to the side that I want it to stick to first. Then the side that's going to overlap, I go ahead and take off the paper backing of that, put it on the other side, stick it over. Now for the sleeves, they're supposed to have these long, feathery, drapey things coming down. And the fabric, I think, would be too thick. So let's use ribbon. So I went ahead, took some ribbon, folded it in half, sewed it together, leaving a big loop at the top, fray checked the ends, and then once it was dry, I put them on. I did, for each sleeve, I think I did 6. Because they're supposed to be kind of overlapping, and they're supposed to look kind of roughly and not smooth. That looks so cool. Once that's done, I took 3 horseshoe, not quite horseshoe, shield shapes, sewed them together, and then I sewed them to the dress on each shoulder. This is like for a shoulder guard look, which she had in the movie, if you recall the picture. Once those are both nice and secure, oh my goodness. It's looking so awesome. Yeah, that looks exactly like I wanted it to. Perfect. But now she needs a cape. And this is too big. We're using a different fabric. This is... I forget what this is. This is like a tapestry type fabric, but it's silk. I got this from Joanne's years ago for our belly dance costume, and I still have a little bit extra left over. So I had used it originally for my original doll, and I had sewed the cape edges. In this case, I ended up just fray checking it, and I just kept holding it up to the dress. Then I added 2 squares of Velcro onto the back of the cape, and then I used that to secure the cape to the dress using the other sides. You know, and then I painted these little paper flowers I got at Michael's for the feathers. The first time around I'd gotten silk flowers and taken them apart. Well, I couldn't find those this time, so I got paper. but it worked out perfectly. I painted them with the white paper with some pearly acrylic. Once that's all done, I wrapped the doll up in saran wrap and painted her scalp. Now we're going to make her some hair wefts with some white nylon hair from Doll Planet. I think it's called First Snow. So basically, making glued hair wefts is easy. You just take a surface that it's not going to stick to, put down some glue, glue the hair down onto it, let it dry. Then I glued it with a different glue. I think I used Mod Podge, and glued it to the doll. Once that was completely dry, I used my straightener and a butter knife to make it lay the way I wanted it to lay. Taking Apoxy Sculpt, I started on the headdress base. And yes, this is the same way I did the headdress. Now, the first time around, I had to figure this out. For the Barbie doll, the hair was too poofy. Now, normally I would just sand this down, but those curves are just too tight. So I'm just going to use my little X-Acto knife here just to take out any rough edges and smooth those out. And then we're going to just buff the surface, make it kind of smooth. I went ahead and painted this with the flat acrylic white paint that I use for my miniatures. Let it dry, 2 coats of course. Then I covered it with pearly white to make it give it that marbling effect. Once that's dry, I coat it with a coat of no wipe top coat nail polish and then cured it with my UV lamp. Cool thing about this is no dry time. You just have to wait for it to cure for a minute. Now, taking some Polygel or hybrid gel or Acrygel that in clear and some rubbing alcohol for my brushes and my thing, I went ahead and made some spikes and cured those. I used a little bit of a buffing block to just take off any rough edges on the edges of the shapes. And then that's after I rubbed them once with rubbing alcohol and then again afterwards to get the dust off. Reason being, this stuff does have a sticky layer on the top, so you have to remove it. Taking a bead of more Polygel, I used that to glue the spikes onto the headdress base and cured them while holding them in the right position. You know what? I got this Morovan non-sticky building gel that's supposed to not stick to anything. And I tried that and it worked just as well. You could use either or. It just has to be in clear. Once I get the first row of spikes done, I go ahead and make sure all of the Polygel is nice and sticky free. I use my no wipe top coat to make it shiny. I cured that first layer. Then I added some chrome powder. Now when you use chrome powder over clear, it just adds a perfect glittery sheen. After 2 rows of spikes and repeating all these steps, oh, it's so sparkly. I even used a little bit of chrome polish and another coat of non-wipe top coat gel to the base headdress with base too. Then I took a crimping iron and I crimped her hair because her hair is supposed to be really curly. And then I added a little bit of fabric and glued it in. Introducing the Sorceress of Grayskull action figure from the 1987 Masters of the Universe movie. Here's a stand-up of her with an original version. I had an extra. It's just amazing to see how much more detail the new one has versus how she was before that. And yes, I did paint the stuff that came with her to match her outfit and added some detail. And as you can see, here's a Barbie, here's a custom action figure, and there's a teeny tiny little millimeter figure that I painted quite a few years ago. I hope you all enjoyed watching her creation. I certainly enjoyed making her again, even if it was a smaller scale. In the meantime, have a great day, stay safe, stay tuned, bye.